Imagine a quiet, sleepy town in Alaska, where everyone knows each other and life moves at a slow, predictable pace. People go about their days tending to their businesses, shoveling snow and chatting over coffee, never expecting that a single moment could shatter their sense of security. And then it happened: daring bank robbery. Bold in its simplicity, yet executed with such precision that it left witnesses stunned and police scrambling. But what made this crime truly unforgettable wasn't just the theft itself. It was what happened next. The man behind the robbery didn't just vanish into the city, the countryside, or even a distant state. He disappeared into the vast, wild expanse of Alaska's wilderness, a place so remote and unforgiving that few humans can survive there for long. For days, then weeks, and eventually months, authorities launched exhaustive searches, deploying helicopters, canine units, snowmobiles, and teams of trackers who combed the forests and mountains in every direction, yet they found nothing. No footprints, no discarded items, not even a whisper of his presence. It was as if he had simply melted into the snow, the trees, and the icy rivers themselves, leaving the world to wonder if he had planned it perfectly or if fate had smiled upon him in some impossible way. What made the story even more astonishing was the knowledge that Alaska is not just a place of scenic beauty, it is a land of extremes. Temperatures can plunge far below freezing, storms can bury entire landscapes in snow overnight, and predators roam freely, ready to turn the unwary into prey. And yet, somehow, this man survived, navigating treacherous terrain, avoiding search parties, and living off the land in a place that would break even the most hardened outdoorsman. Over the years, his story has fascinated law enforcement, survival experts, and true crime enthusiasts alike, sparking endless debate about how someone could vanish so completely in a world that modern technology and human ingenuity have made increasingly difficult to escape. Today we dive deep into this unbelievable tale, exploring not only the heist and the disappearance, but also the remarkable survival, the critical mistakes, and the haunting questions that remain unanswered. Was it preparation, luck, or an extraordinary instinct for survival that allowed him to escape into the wilderness? By the end of this story, you'll see why this bank robber didn't just commit a crime. He pulled off one of the most baffling disappearances in modern history, a feat that continues to captivate, mystify anyone who hears his story. Imagine a quiet, snow-covered town in Alaska, where the air is crisp and the streets are lined with frozen cars and snowbanks taller than most people. In this town, everyone knows everyone, and life moves at a pace dictated by the harsh winter and the rhythm of nature rather than by schedules or deadlines. It was the kind of place where nothing much happened, where residents could predict the daily patterns of their neighbors, the movements of local wildlife, and even the behavior of the snowstorms that could sweep through without warning. Yet it was here, in this seemingly peaceful setting, that a man would execute one of the most audacious robberies in modern history, only to disappear completely into the wilderness, defying every attempt to track him down, and creating a legend that law enforcement and survival experts alike would discuss for years to come. The man, whose identity was later reconstructed through witness accounts and forensic clues, was ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in planning. He had studied the bank and the town meticulously for weeks, noting everything from security measures to employee routines, from the schedule of patrol officers to the patterns of snowfall that might cover tracks or delay pursuit. On the day of the robbery, he appeared calm and unassuming, walking into the bank like any other customer. Yet behind his composed exterior was a mind orchestrating every movement with precision. Within minutes, he had taken control of the bank, securing the cash and leaving employees and customers in shock. There were no dramatic confrontations, no demands shouted in panic, just a quiet, terrifying efficiency that left everyone stunned. Once outside, he did not flee in a predictable direction. Unlike most criminals who might rush to a vehicle or disappear into a nearby town, he turned toward the wilderness, toward the dense forests, icy rivers, and jagged mountains that surround the small Alaskan town. This was not just a crime, it was a carefully calculated gamble. Alaska, with its extremes of temperature, treacherous terrain, and predators that roam freely, is a place where survival is uncertain, even for experienced outdoorsmen. and yet he chose it deliberately, knowing that conventional search methods, helicopters, K-9 units, snowmobiles, and ground teams would be challenged by the environment itself. It was a high-stakes decision, and it would define the story for years to come. Authorities immediately launched search operations. Helicopters circled above, scanning for movement, while teams on snowmobiles and on foot combed the forests and frozen rivers. Dogs trained to track human scent were brought in, and locals were asked to remain vigilant. Every day, every hour, teams pushed deeper into the wilderness, yet no trace of the robber was found. Footprints were either absent or quickly covered by blowing snow. The wind erased scent trails, and the dense forest made aerial spotting almost impossible. For months, the man remained elusive, a ghost moving silently through one of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth. Speculation about how he survived began almost immediately. Some suggested he had prepared for this moment for years, bringing with him caches of food, warm clothing, and tools to create shelter in the snow. Others theorized that he had previously practiced survival in the Alaskan wilderness, honing his ability to navigate, hunt, and avoid detection. He had to find water, likely by melting snow, hunt or fish for food, and maintain warmth despite temperatures that could drop below -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Every step was a risk. One mistake could be fatal. Yet somehow, he managed, moving from forest to frozen river, from mountain pass to snow-covered ridge, always staying ahead of the searchers. The wilderness is both a protector and a predator. For every advantage the man gained by using the terrain to hide, he faced threats that could have ended his life in an instant. Wolves and bears roamed the forests. Thin ice could crack beneath his weight. Snowstorms could bury him overnight. Yet survival experts analyzing the case noted that he displayed a level of resourcefulness and endurance rarely seen. He created shelters, likely using fallen trees, snow walls, or natural caves, and sustained himself with whatever food sources he could locate. He moved carefully, deliberately, never leaving trails that could be followed by trackers. The very landscape that would have killed most people became his ally. Then came the mistake, the single critical error that nearly exposed him. It was a small thing, a piece of clothing left behind, a misjudged path, a moment of distraction that allowed authorities to come frighteningly close to catching him. Search teams converged on his location only to find a site abandoned moments before, a ghost trail in the snow. It was a narrow escape, one that highlighted both the risk he had taken and the skill with which he navigated the wilderness. The mistake added a layer of tension to the story, showing that even the most prepared and capable individuals are vulnerable to chance, yet also emphasizing how extraordinary his evasion truly was. As time passed, the man's story became a legend in the region. Sightings, real or imagined, were reported by locals, glimpses of a figure moving through the forest, a shadow crossing a frozen river, a campfire seen from a distance. Law enforcement could never confirm these sightings. The public was left to wonder, had he truly survived? Or were these merely echoes of a myth in the snow? Experts debated endlessly. Could a person live off the land entirely in such harsh conditions? Did he have pre-planned escape routes that allowed him to slip out of Alaska entirely? The uncertainty only added to the mystique surrounding his disappearance. Surviving while being hunted requires more than just knowledge of the land. It requires patience, discipline, and nerves of steel. The man had to avoid leaving any signs of his presence, anticipate search patterns, and make decisions under constant threat. Every choice, from where to build a shelter to when to hunt or move, could mean life or death. Yet reports suggest he navigated the wilderness with extraordinary foresight, making use of natural cover, traveling during storms to mask his movements, and blending into the environment so completely that even advanced technology failed to detect him. The aftermath of the robbery raises even more questions. The stolen money was never recovered. Some speculate he buried caches of cash in hidden locations, while others believe he may have used the funds to establish a new identity elsewhere. Law enforcement remains baffled, and despite decades of investigation, the case is officially unsolved. For the townspeople, the event became a haunting memory, a story passed down of a man who defied capture in a land designed to challenge the strongest individuals. For survival enthusiasts, it became a masterclass in evasion, endurance, and resourcefulness. And for the rest of the world, it became a gripping tale of audacity, intelligence, and the mysteries of the human spirit. Experts in survival psychology suggest that the man's ability to disappear was a combination of preparation, skill, and an almost instinctual understanding of the wilderness. He may have observed the town and environment for months, noting seasonal changes, animal behavior, and human routines. He likely anticipated how authorities would respond and planned routes that exploited gaps in search strategies. Every action was deliberate, from moving under the cover of storms to choosing shelters that would protect him from both elements and prying eyes. In essence, he became part of the wilderness itself, moving silently, surviving invisibly, and remaining untouchable by law enforcement. The man's story challenges our understanding of what is possible. In an age where technology, surveillance, and forensic science are supposed to leave no criminal untraceable, he proved that knowledge of the environment, preparation, and human ingenuity can overcome even the most sophisticated search efforts. He became a ghost in the snow, a figure who exists between reality and legend, and a subject of endless fascination. What became of him, whether he survived, escaped, or eventually succumbed to the harsh wilderness, is still unknown, leaving us with questions that may never be answered. Even decades later, the robbery and disappearance continued to captivate the imagination. Experts in law enforcement, survival, and psychology analyzed the story for clues, theorizing about how he could have navigated the treacherous terrain, avoided detection, and sustained himself for so long. Some believe he may have had previous experience surviving in harsh conditions, or that he relied on innate instincts honed through years of observing the natural world. Others argue that luck played a role, that the combination of severe weather, the vastness of the wilderness, and human error allowed him to remain undetected. Regardless, the outcome remains one of the most extraordinary disappearances in modern crime history. As the weeks stretched into months, the man's mastery of the wilderness became increasingly apparent. He had to contend with the brutal Alaskan winter, where temperatures plunged far below zero, where storms could arrive without warning, and where the snow could cover miles of terrain in a single night. Every step he took had to be deliberate. Footprints left carelessly could betray his location, and even the slightest noise, a snapping branch, a rustling in the underbrush, could draw the attention of searchers or predators. Yet, despite these dangers, he thrived in a way that seemed almost supernatural. He knew how to use the environment to his advantage, blending into the forest like a shadow, moving silently and unseen. Becoming invisible in a land where visibility and exposure could mean life or death, his survival required ingenuity at every turn. He constructed shelters from fallen branches, snow, and rocks, creating structures that insulated him from the cold while remaining hidden from above. He found water by melting snow over small fires, carefully controlling the smoke to prevent detection. Food was scarce, yet he hunted small game, trapped animals, and fished in frozen rivers, sustaining himself in a place where even a single misstep could have fatal consequences. Every meal, every movement, was a calculated risk. It wasn't merely survival, it was a test of endurance, intellect, and instinct. At times, he moved under the cover of blizzards, letting the wind erase his tracks and mask his scent. He knew the patterns of local wildlife and used them as a guide, understanding that animals often led the way to water, shelter, and even safer routes through the forest. Wolves and bears roamed the area, and encounters with them were inevitable. Yet he learned to coexist, observing them from a distance, avoiding confrontations, and even using their presence to distract search parties. In this way, the wilderness became both his adversary and his ally, challenging him while shielding him from the eyes of those who sought to capture him. Occasionally, the man came close to discovery. Search teams would zero in on a location where they believed he was hiding, only to find traces that suggested he had been there hours before and had already moved. One near capture, in particular, became the stuff of legend. Authorities later revealed that they had almost caught him when he briefly surfaced near a riverbank to gather supplies. A snowstorm had masked his presence initially, but a small piece of clothing caught on a branch revealed he had been there. By the time law enforcement arrived, he had vanished again, leaving nothing but footprints quickly covered by fresh snow. This incident highlighted the razor-thin margin between survival and capture and underscored the incredible skill and adaptability he possessed. His story, however, was not just about evasion, it was about ingenuity and the human will to survive against seemingly impossible odds. He managed to navigate hundreds of miles of terrain with minimal equipment, surviving blizzards, avalanches, and frozen rivers. He used knowledge of the land, intuition, and an understanding of search strategies to stay ahead of the authorities. Every day, he weighed risk versus reward, moving closer to potential resources while avoiding areas most likely to be monitored. It was a delicate dance, one that required constant calculation, observation, and nerve. As the years passed, speculation about the man's fate only deepened. Did he ultimately escape the wilderness and start a new life elsewhere? Or did the harsh environment eventually claim him? Some theorized that he had established hidden caches of food and equipment, allowing him to sustain himself for years, while others believed he may have left Alaska entirely, blending into society under a new identity. The stolen money was never recovered, adding to the mystery and fueling countless theories. Experts debated the likelihood of surviving long-term in the Alaskan wilderness, with some insisting it would have required near-superhuman skill and preparation, while others argued that luck played a decisive role. The case also illustrated the limitations of technology and human pursuit in extreme environments. Despite helicopters, thermal imaging, and tracking dogs, the wilderness remained an impenetrable fortress. Snowstorms could erase footprints overnight, rivers could mask scent trails, and dense forests could hide even the largest human movements. In this environment, the man's knowledge of the land was more effective than any technology. It was a stark reminder that while humans have developed incredible tools, nature still holds dominion in certain arenas, capable of outsmarting even the most advanced systems. Local folklore quickly embraced the story. Residents spoke of a shadowy figure moving through the forests, someone who could appear and disappear like a ghost. Media outlets sensationalized the tale, calling him the ghost of the Alaskan wilderness, or the invisible robber, further cementing his legend. The story inspired fascination among survival enthusiasts, law enforcement professionals, and true crime aficionados alike, each trying to reconstruct the events and understand how one man could outwit both nature and human pursuit. Experts examining the case noted that the man's success depended on a combination of preparation, experience, and instinct. He may have anticipated search patterns, using knowledge of local topography to identify blind spots and natural barriers that would shield him from observation. He likely carried essential survival gear, fire-starting tools, knives, perhaps even small caches of supplies that allowed him to remain self-sufficient in a hostile environment. His ability to adapt quickly to changing conditions, to improvise when confronted with unforeseen challenges, was as critical to his survival as his initial planning. Over time, law enforcement's attempts to find him became increasingly difficult. As search teams withdrew, the landscape reclaimed the traces of his presence. Snow covered his paths, rivers washed away evidence, and the wilderness seemed to erase all signs of human activity. To authorities, he had become an enigma, a man who had not merely escaped capture but had vanished completely, leaving behind only questions and speculation. This total disappearance into the Alaskan wild became a case study in survival, evasion, and human adaptability. The man's story challenges our understanding of what is possible in extreme circumstances. In an age where surveillance, drones, and forensic science have made it increasingly difficult for criminals to hide, he demonstrated that knowledge of the environment, patience, and human ingenuity can surpass technology. He became a master of his surroundings, moving silently through forests, crossing frozen rivers, and finding sustenance in a land where mistakes are often fatal. His ability to survive while being pursued by trained law enforcement teams remains a remarkable example of adaptation and skill. His tale also raises haunting questions. Did he eventually find freedom beyond the wilderness, living out his life under a new identity? Did he succumb to the harsh conditions of Alaska, leaving the forest to claim another lost soul? Could anyone else replicate his feat, or was it a rare combination of intelligence, preparation, and luck? These questions linger, creating a legend that continues to inspire debate and fascination. For decades, the story has served as both cautionary tale and source of inspiration. Survivalists study it, learning from his methods and considering how knowledge, preparation, and instinct can make the difference between life and death. Law enforcement uses it as an example of the limitations inherent in even the most sophisticated search operations, reminding them that terrain and human adaptability can defy expectations, and the general public remains captivated by the mystery of a man who committed a crime, vanished, and became a ghost in one of the most remote and unforgiving places on Earth. Even as technology continues to advance, the legend persists. Satellites, drones, and thermal imaging may scan the forests, but the wilderness remains vast and unpredictable. Rivers shift, snowstorms bury evidence, and forests conceal movement. The man's story reminds us that human skill and knowledge of the natural world can sometimes outweigh even the most advanced technology, creating a narrative that is both thrilling and humbling. Ultimately, the man who vanished into Alaska's wilderness represents a rare intersection of audacity, intelligence, and survival instinct. He didn't simply commit a robbery, orchestrated one of the most baffling disappearances in modern history. Against all odds, he evaded capture in a landscape designed to challenge even the strongest humans. And in doing so, he etched his story into legend. Whether he survived, escaped, or ultimately succumbed to the elements remains unknown, but the tale continues to captivate imaginations around the world.